spiritual leaders that have been divinely inspired throughout history. And Baha'u'llah made a very interesting statement. Baha'u'llah is what we believe the latest of these messengers, when he said that the whole purpose of the divine messengers, the whole purpose of Jesus, the whole purpose of Muhammad, the whole purpose of Abraham and Moses and Baha'u'llah, the whole purpose they have come for is to prepare us for that hour when we transition into the next world. He said that they may ascend, in purity to the next world. In other words, they came basically not to tell you what ring to wear on your finger or what badge to wear or where to go on a Saturday or a Sunday for an hour or what to label yourself. They didn't come for those reasons. They came to tell us basically the rules of existence, the rules of life. And by telling us that, then we can then follow the rules. When you know the rules of something, you're much better able to win or to achieve something. So if I were to tell you right now the rules of tennis, if anyone play tennis, raise your hand if you play tennis. Okay. If I said the rules of tennis are to hit the ball as hard as you can and as far as you can. Just get it, whack it like a home run if you can. And then the further it goes, the more points you get. And so you whack the ball like that. Now, when they take score, of course, you're not going to get any points because you didn't know the rules, that you had to get it over the net, but inside, certain boundaries. If someone told you, well, the rules of golf are that you have to hit the ball as hard as you can, and you get more points if you hit it into the water. You get like 10 extra points if you hit it into the water. If they told you those rules, if you played the game of golf, you would not get very many points when they counted up the score. The same is true of any game or anything that you play. You need to know the rules, how you score, what does score and what doesn't score, and then how to do that. What is the best technique in baseball? What's the best technique, for swinging and so on. Now, you may think that this is kind of a funny analogy to say, well, what if someone told you the rules of tennis were to hit the ball, miles away and stuff like that? But in fact, that's what's happening to us in the world today. We are being told the rules of life by the world, by the physical world, by creation, by other people. And these are all wrong. We're being told that the rules of life are to acquire as much money as you possibly can, and that's how you win the game of life, or to acquire more power, or to acquire more status, or to have more comfort, to have more luxury. These things, we're told, are the things that will win the game of life. And then when the score is counted up, we say, hold on, how come I didn't score anything? He says, well, you didn't really know the rules, and we sent you the rules. We sent it about every 1,000 years for the last 6,000 years. We sent you the rules, but instead you decided to listen to these idle fancies, these vain imaginings, these superstitions of the world telling you what is the things you need to do. And you've done those, and now you've kind of wasted your time. This is what we may feel when we go to the next world. Now, I should explain something to you, that Baha'is do not believe that there's death, nor does any religion believe there's death. There's only transfiguration to another plane of existence. And when you go to that other plane of existence, there are certain things that you need in that place that you travel to. Baha'u'llah made a comparison of this to a child in the womb. If you could remember when you were in the womb, you probably can't remember, but if you could, you would realize that it's a very limited world, and it's a very short period of time that you're in it. But while you're in that womb, you're developing certain things that you don't need in the womb. You're developing eyesight and hearing and touch and so on. These things you don't need. They're of no apparent avail to you in the womb. But if you don't develop them in that short period of time, then when you come into this world, you will not be able to take advantage of the things of this world. If you didn't develop your eyes, you couldn't see this world. If you didn't develop your ears, you couldn't hear this world. If you didn't develop your sense of touch or your central nervous system or whatever, you could not partake of this world, and you would be basically very limited in your ability. Well, we are in the womb of the spiritual world. And we must develop our spiritual qualities, the qualities of the Spirit, while we are here, so that when we make that transition into the next world, which is equivalent to birth, then we will be able to partake of the spiritual world. We'll be able to see with our spiritual eyes, hear with our spiritual ears, and touch with our sense of touch, and so on. Consequently, this is the goal that we have been all given. We've been given an existence in this world. We've been given a veil, or what I say, something that blinds us from this, which is the physical world, and said you need to transcend that physical world and understand what are the spiritual things you need to develop now, so that when you pass into the next world, you will then have joy and radiance and excitement and be able to do things. This is the whole purpose of religion. There is only one religion, and this is the religion of spirituality. Baha'u'llah, one time he said, this is the changeless faith of God, eternal in the past, eternal in the future. That means there's no difference between all the teachers of God. There are some social differences, and there are some reasons why he reveals himself in each new age, and we could talk about that. But essentially, Baha'u'llah is saying that there is an essence of religion which causes us to want to develop our soul, that we all have a soul, that we all must be concerned with our eternal nature and where we're going and what we're going to do. Many times I like to think, when I used to travel before COVID, that when I go through security, they won't let me take things through the security. They used to before 9/11, but now they take your bottle of shampoo away or something like that. And I said, when did they ever bring down a 747 with a bottle of shampoo or a glass of thing of water or something? In other words, you can't get through security very well anymore. You can't take things through. But every time that happens, I like to think of that as an analogy for this world. Because when we go through the great security gates, the next world, there are many things they're not going to let us take through. There are many things we can't take. They're not going to let us take our money. They're not going to let us take our possessions. They're not going to let us take our job. They're not going to let us take the glory or the fame or anything else that we had. There's only some things that get through the security gates when we go to the next world. And those are our spiritual qualities. And our spiritual qualities are primarily the good qualities of the human soul, the qualities of love, the qualities of compassion, the qualities of forgiveness, the qualities of generosity. In other words, these things that we're told are good for us to do, that the world might tell us is bad for us to do, that we can get along better in the world if we're not so loving and not so generous and not so kind. The world tells us those are the rules, whereas God tells us, no. When you go to the next world, you will, Baha'u'llah says, he says, you will estimate the worth of your deeds that you achieved in this life, and you will realize all of the things that you did not achieve. This life is nothing but a patience test, a love test, a tolerance test. It's a test. Every moment of your life, you are being given a chance to achieve something in life by being kind, by being loving, by being considerate. When I was just in the Gold Coast, where I went to this amusement park with my stepson, and they had this little ride that you go on, and they gave you these guns with lasers, and you had to shoot all the things that came at you as you were coming through. It was a big ride, and it was all choo, 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 choo. When it came to the end, of course, my son had about 70,000 points, and I had about 15,000 points. I couldn't hit anything. I was really lousy at it. But it made me think that this is what God is doing every day. He's putting people in your path, and he's saying, here, I'm going to give you a chance to hit that golf ball into the hole. Or I'm going to give you a chance to hit that tennis thing over the hole. And instead, you're rude to the person, or you ignore the person, or you're not generous to the person, and you missed your chance. You didn't score a point that day. And so when you go to the next world, you will estimate the worth of your deeds and say, oh my God, I had so many opportunities. I had no idea how many chances God put in my life in order for me to just learn to have compassion and love and generosity and forgiveness and these qualities. And they are easily developed if you just follow a simple principle, which the son of Baha'u'llah, his name was Adi-Baha, he said there's a simple way to develop your spiritual qualities, your qualities of love and kindness and compassion. He said, in essence, I'm paraphrasing, don't worry about yesterday and don't worry about tomorrow. Those are 2 days in which you really have no control over. Yesterday's gone, you can't do anything about it. Tomorrow is not here, you can't do anything about it. He said, just worry about what you do today. And he said, every day when you wake up, he said, think about how you were yesterday and try and be a little better today. Try to be a little more forgiving, a little more kind, a little more compassionate, a little more generous. Try to be a little bit more. And if you are a little bit more, then the next day, check yourself. And if you were a little bit more, a little bit better, he says, then thank God and pray for an increase. And he says, if you were not, he said, then just pray to God for forgiveness and keep trying again. Do not try to have a loving life. Do not try to have a forgiving life. Do not even try to have a forgiving day. A forgiving week or a loving week. Just try to have a loving day. And let's even make it smaller than that. Let's say, just try to do one loving act today. Somebody that perhaps you haven't been so kind to. Maybe it's your husband. Maybe it's your wife. Maybe it's your children, maybe it's your workmates or your boss or your friends and so on. And you haven't been so loving. You just say, okay, well, today, maybe I'll just listen to that person a little bit. Or maybe I'll nod. Maybe I'll praise them. Maybe I'll see a good quality in them. Just one act. In other words, we become spiritual one day at a time and one act at a time. And Adi-Baha said, this is the path. And he used the term ruse. I think it was ruse by ruse, kam, ruse by ruse. If you're Persian, you know that means little by little, day by day. Basically, Adi-Baha said the only goal in life is to be better today than you were yesterday. You don't have to be perfect, okay? In other words, if you killed 10 people yesterday, try to kill 9 people today. And you may laugh at that and think that's silly, but in fact, in 10 days, you would not be killing any more people, which would be a good thing. And there are people that are doing horrible, terrible things like killing. There must be a path for every one of us. And the path is day by day. It's like walking. If you're living in Seattle, if you had to walk to New York, I think I looked it up one time. I was using Los Angeles, but I think it takes about 30 days. I think I went on Google Maps or something like that, and I typed walking, and it was 30 days or something like that. But then I realized that it expects you to walk 24 hours a day, so it might take 60 days. Anyway, have any of you walked from Seattle to New York City? Probably not. I'm guessing that you haven't done it. But if you did want to do it, how would you do it? And the answer is easy, one step at a time. You take one step today towards New York, you're one step closer to New York. You take another step, you're another step. In 60 days, you're in New York, believe it or not. It's amazing to even think of that. And in the old days, of course, people did walk those kind of things. So the point is that think of love not as a destination, but as a journey. And you can take one step closer to love today with the next person you meet. Look into their eyes, smile, see the good in them, and you're one step closer. And life is not a collection of weeks or months or years. Life is a collection of attributes that you acquire on a daily, personal basis. Adi-Baha said that you must just keep trying to do these things, and you will gradually become more spiritual. Now, we're told in the Baha'i teachings that there are a number of things that will help you to become spiritual, and all of these things come from the great teachers of God. They come from Jesus, they come from Muhammad, they come from Buddha and Krishna. And Baha'u'llah summarized them all in a wonderful book called The Hidden Words. If you're new to the Baha'i teachings, you can go to this simple little book. It's very short. Half of it was translated from Persian, and half of it was translated from Arabic. And Baha'u'llah said it is the essence of all the religious teachings of the past. It teaches you how to become spiritual. But we learn that spirituality is dependent in two areas. There are two general areas. One is what I call the inner development of the soul, and one is what I call the outward expression of the human soul. The inner development of the soul involves prayer, reading sacred scriptures, and meditating. Now, meditating on the truth of these sacred scriptures. Now, you may say, well, prayer, reading the sacred scriptures, and meditation, aren't they all pretty much the same thing? And the answer is no. We're told in the Baha'i teachings that there are three separate spiritual disciplines, and one must do all of them on a daily basis. Prayer is talking to God. That's where it is. Reading the sacred scriptures is God talking to us. And meditation is us talking with ourself, with our higher self. Believe it or not, this is how Abdu'l-Baha described meditation, as that you put forth a question to yourself and yourself answers. And these three things work in combination, and they are spiritual disciplines which all the religions have practiced for at least 6,000 years. And when I say 6,000 years, I'm talking about recorded history, which goes back to the Sumerians about 6,000 years ago. Even though archaeologically we know that religions were even practiced earlier than that. So these are the three inner things. And interestingly, some people have thought in the past that these three things alone were enough to develop your soul, and that you would go to the next world and you would be fine. In fact, people say all you got to do is just believe in him, whether you do these things or not. And Baha'u'llah, he put a stop to that in the very beginning of his book of laws. It's called the Most Holy Book, the Book of Aqdas. It's called the Most Holy Book. He said that that's not enough. And in one passage, he said the days when idol worship was deemed sufficient is now ended. Idol meaning IDLE, meaning just, not doing much, just worshiping, but not having any action. He says, those days are now ended. Now you have to get out in the world and you have to do these other three things. And the other three things are, number one, is service to other people, to be of help, to be of assistance to the poor, to the sick, to the elderly, to the distressed, to the downtrodden, to be a helper and a server of mankind. In fact, Abdu'l-Baha said to be a Baha'i is to love mankind and to serve mankind. And if one does these things, it does not matter whether or not they've ever heard of Baha'u'llah or not. But if they don't do these things, to love mankind, to serve mankind, to work for the betterment of mankind, then they are not a Baha'i, even though they could have called themselves a Baha'i for 50 years. He continued with that sentence. He said, a man can call himself handsome, but he fools nobody. And then he says, God knows, what we do. So basically, one of the three outer spiritual disciplines is to be of service and help to other people. Another one of those is to try on a daily basis to develop your spiritual qualities, your compassion, your love, your mercy, your forgiveness on a daily basis. In fact, Baha'u'llah said, bring thyself to account each day, ere thou art summoned to a reckoning, for death unheralded shall come upon thee, and thou shalt be called to give account to thy deeds. He says, bring thyself to account each day. He didn't say bring thyself to account each month or each year. Have any of you ever tried a New Year's resolution? Have you ever tried a New Year's resolution? You say, well, from now on, I'm just going to do this. And you say it like that. You feel really good about it. Sometimes you might go on a journey or a trip or have an insight. And as you're coming back, you think, oh, from now on, I'm going to make this change. It rarely works because the year is not the correct unit. The month is not the correct unit. The day is the unit. Each day, we must try and do these things. And in every one of the 6 elements that we're told in the Baha'i teachings develop spirituality, I've already mentioned 5 of them. One is prayer, one is meditation, one is reading the sacred scriptures, one is service, and the other one now is trying to acquire virtues. In one passage, it's referred to as trying to make your life more in accordance with the divine teachings, with following the divine example. Every one of those, we're told, have to be on a daily, sometimes even more than once daily. For example, prayer at least one every day. And, when you pray to God and you say, God, I love you or something, do you think God needs it? Does God really need us to pray? Who needs the prayer? In other words, the prayer is something for us that we gain. The same with service. You may think, well, service is to help other people, but in fact, we gain the most benefit from it. The sixth thing that we're told we must do to develop spiritually is to be of enlightenment and guidance to other people. What one might call teaching or helping or serving. To the extent that we're able, we must also be guides and teachers to other people, to accompany other people, to help them, and so on. These six things, we are told, in the Baha'i teachings, authoritatively, there's a letter we have from the head of the Baha'i faith that says, these are the six essential things: prayer, meditation, reading the sacred scriptures, service, striving daily to become more loving, compassionate, spiritual, all the virtues, and guidance and teaching of other people. If you do these six things, according to the Baha'i teachings, you will acquire spiritual life. You will become alive. And this is a very important concept, the concept of spiritual life, because we know that physical life is dependent on certain things. If you want to maintain physical life, there are certain things. Science tells us that there are exactly six things that we must get. We must get food. We must get water. We must get air. We must get sleep or rest. We must get exercise. There's something else that we have to get. I can't remember. If someone can tell me what they are. But there are six things. And if you get them all, you will stay alive and you will grow, because life is dependent on certain prerequisites. Now, if you look in Animal Planet or a channel, you can see that animals are spending all their time trying to get these six things. By the way, the sixth thing is to stay within a certain range of temperature, to not get too hot or too cold, to stay within a certain range of temperature. Those are the six things. And you'll see an animal, if it gets too cold, he'll go south or north, depending on what part of the hemisphere he's in. And if he gets too warm, he'll travel. In other words, the animal will try and keep within that range of temperature. If he gets hungry, he'll look for food. If he gets thirsty, he'll look for water. If he, if he can't breathe, he'll figure out. In other words, animals know to stay alive by looking for these six things. We must have the same kind of thirst for spirituality that will then give us the desire for these same six things, because our soul cannot live without these six things. There's a very interesting passage from Abdu'l-Baha in which he was asked, how does one become spiritual? And he said, well, the first thing you have to do, he said there's a number of stages, he said. The first thing you have to do, he said, is to acquire a thirst for spirituality. Acquire a thirst for spirituality. Then he went on to say, and the way to do this, and he explained how you could acquire that thirst. But before we do this, he said the first thing you have to do is to acquire a thirst for spirituality. And this is a very interesting concept, because thirst, you know the feeling of thirst. If you've ever been in a situation where you really are thirsty, where your mouth is parched, where it's dry, where it's hot, where you think you're going to die if you don't get water pretty quickly. That feeling. I'm sure you've all had it sometime. Well, Abdu'l-Baha said, you got to have that feeling for spirituality before anything else. Think of the word thirst and say thirst rhymes with first. Okay? There's no point in telling someone what to do if they don't have the thirst. There's an old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, which is a stupid saying, because I grew up with horses. My grandfather had horses, and horses, they would always drink the water. It's only people. People are the only ones that are stupid enough to not drink water. But anyway, it's an old saying. But the point is that spiritual teachings, they must be predicated upon a thirst for following them. You must have this, and you must realize that your spiritual life is dependent on these things, and that you crave them to the same extent that you crave water when you're thirsty. So that's what Abdu'l-Baha said. And so he then went on to say, the way to acquire this thirst is to meditate on the future life. That was an interesting thing. He said, we got to have the thirst first, but then before that, if you want to get that thirst, you have to meditate on the future life. This is something that you must do on a daily basis. You must understand that you are going to go to the next world. So far, nobody has been able to avoid that journey. We're all going to do it. You know, if I told you the end of a movie, you would say I was giving you a spoiler. Well, I'm going to give you the spoiler to the end of your life. You're going to die in the end. We're going to go to the next world. That's just the way it is. The point of the matter is that you need to be prepared for that. If you're going to go on a journey, like raise your hand if this is true. You're going to go on a long trip, say an overseas trip, you know, the next day. Are you packing just the night before? Anyone raise their hand? Are you packing just the night before? Okay. Okay. The next morning when you wake up, are you still packing a little bit? And maybe as you're in the taxi going to the airport, are you thinking, what did I pack? Did I get everything? Is that right? Okay. Obviously, you're thinking about that. Why are you thinking so much about that? Because you're going somewhere far away. You can't come back and get what you had. And so you want to make sure you have everything you need for where you're going. And the things that you don't need, that you can't take, you know, maybe your 60-inch color TV or something because you're going camping. Well, you're not worried about that one so much because you're worried about what you can take with you. And it so happens that in your suitcase, you cannot put your money, you cannot put your job, you cannot put your house, you cannot put your glory and your fame. But there are things that you can pack in your suitcase. You can pack love, and you can pack kindness, and you can forgiveness and generosity. And you can pack every good deed that you ever did in your life, every kind thing you ever said to a person or made another person feel, that goes in your suitcase. You can have a huge suitcase if you want. You just have to pack them in. And today you can put something in your suitcase. And so when Abdu'l-Baha says, meditate on the future life, I think what he wants you to think about is when you make that transition, what's in your suitcase? What is in your suitcase, you know? And that meditation will obviously help one to have this thirst. Then he says, and I'm going to continue with the same passage, you can look this one up. He said, first acquire for thirst for spirituality. He says, the way to acquire this thirst is to meditate on the future life. Then live the life, live the life, live the life. And he said it 3 times. And what he means by live the life is the spiritual life. The life that Jesus called us unto, the life that Muhammad called us unto. You know, they went to Jesus and they asked him many questions because a lot of things he said they thought were physical. For example, Jesus said, you must be born again. And somebody said, it's in the Gospel in the New Testament, they said, what do you mean by born again? Do I have to go back into my mother's belly and come out again? And Jesus said, thou fool. He was probably translated, but not right. Maybe he was something a little. But anyway, he said, thou fool, that which is of the flesh is of the flesh, and that which is of the spirit is of the spirit. So he was trying to explain that there is a physical world and a spiritual world. And I'm talking about the spiritual world. In fact, if you carefully read the Gospels, everything that Jesus said is a call to what he called the kingdom. That's what I call the spiritual world. It's a call from the physical to the spiritual. And Baha'u'llah said the same thing. He says, close one eye and open the other. Close it to the physical world and open to the hallowed beauty of the beloved, to the spiritual world. So basically this life, it's kind of like the Matrix. It doesn't really have any existence. The physical world, Baha'u'llah says, it's a vain, empty show. It's just it's a construct which God has made that we can have a short period of time in which we can learn to see past these physical things, this need for power and money and glory and fame and dominating other people and so on, to see past that and develop our spiritual qualities. Basically, I like to think of this world kind of like a gym. When you go into a gym, if anyone ever gone into a gym, look at every machine, and you will realize that every single machine is only created to make some physical movement difficult. Every machine is only purpose is to make something hard to do, some physical thing hard to do. And we pay good money. We pay lots of money to go to these things to make things hard to do. Why do we do that? And we do it because we understand the principle of no pain, no gain, that when you exert a muscle hard, it kind of rips and tears that muscle a little bit, creates little holes, and then those holes get filled in, so the muscle actually gets a little bigger. And then you can do it more and more and more. We understand that. Well, so also is this life and this physical world nothing but a gym for the human soul. We struggle against things that like impatience, like anger. Anger comes at us. By the way, the biggest gym is not other people. Other people are a pretty bad gym. They make things very hard. People are pretty hard to love in many cases. But the harder they are to love, the better the gym machine they are, because when we do love them, then we have developed our spiritual capacity more. But the biggest gym is ourself, our own ego, our lower nature, our lower self that we try to overcome. So on a daily basis, we're trying to learn to love unlovable people. And by the way, learning to love unlovable people is the goal in life. There's no great glory or achievement to love somebody lovable. Big deal. So they're lovable, so you love them. But if you can love someone that is hard to love, then you have developed your spiritual capacity. You put a few points on the board, and when you go to the next world, you'll remember that, because Baha'u'llah said you'll estimate your deeds and you'll be very happy about them. There's a very old teaching, and we have found it in every religion and also in every spiritual tradition and social tradition, and it's called the Golden Rule. It means to do to others as you would have them do unto you, or don't do to other people what you don't want done unto you. It's a very simple law, and it's in the Baha'i teachings, but it's also in all the other religions. It's very simple because it enables you to think about what you want and then project that onto other people. What do they want? Well, what do you not want? You don't want to be humiliated. You don't want to be embarrassed. You don't want to be made to stupid, called stupid. You don't want to be ignored. Those are things you don't want. So just don't do that to other people. What things do you like? You like praise. You like attention. You like love. You like compassion. Well, if those are things you like, just put yourself in the other person's shoes. There's an old saying, it says, never criticize a person, and before criticizing them, walk a mile in their shoes. And of course, that way, if you do criticize them, you're a mile away from them and you have their shoes, which is an old way of looking at the thing. But the point of the matter is, always look at everything you do with another person as if you were that person. Now, the reason I say this is that not only did all religions teach it, but in the 1970s, there was a man by the name of Raymond Moody. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he starting in the mid to late 70s, medical science advanced to the stage where they could revive people that would have normally died. In fact, they actually die a little bit and then they get revived. And when they're revived, they very often, tell experiences of, just maybe a few seconds or a few minutes that they actually were making the transition to the next world, and then medical science revived them. We call this near-death experiences, or NDEs. There are hundreds of books on the subject, and you may even know some people that have had this now, because it's becoming more common now as medical science is advancing. So in the late 70s, Raymond Moody wrote a book in which he studied hundreds of accounts of people that had these experiences and wrote down what the qualities are of the next world. And the first thing that fascinated him about it was that he said that it did not matter from what background, what country, what culture, or what religion they came from. They all had pretty much the same experiences. He says it didn't matter if they were religious or not religious, Catholic or Buddhist or Hindu or whatever. They all pretty much had the same experiences. You would have expected, if it wasn't real, that the Christians would have their vision of it, and the Muslims would have theirs, and the atheists would have theirs, and so on. But he said, no, that wasn't the case. There seems to be a common, universal set of features of this. And he wrote down all the features. I can't remember how many, 10 or 12 or something like that. And not very many people have all of them. One or two had close to all of them. But they were the most common features of these near-death experiences. Well, one of them, he mentioned, I found interesting because it corresponded with my understanding of the Baha'i teachings. And he said that they had a life review, that as they went to the next world, they reviewed their whole life. In some cases, they even said that the life review seemed as long as their whole life, even though we know from the actual medical experiment that it was only a few minutes that they were in that state. Still, the life review seemed like the whole life. Well, that, of course, is fascinating in itself, and Baha'u'llah said it is plain and evident that we will, on the hour of death, estimate the worth of our deeds. What was fascinating, he said, was that most of the people reported that when they had the life review, it was different. They did not experience their life from their point of view. Rather, they re-experienced their life from the point of view of the other person. So whenever they were kind to someone, they actually felt their kindness. Whenever they were generous or loving to a person, they felt their own love because they felt it from the point of view of the other person. And whenever they were mean or cruel or humiliating or angry with another person, they felt their own wrath and anger coming at themselves because they experienced their life this time from the point of view of other people. And if you experience this when you get into the next world, like you experience and you say, oh my God, why didn't you tell me that this is what's going to happen? Everything I did to people, good or bad, everything I did, I was going to feel it from the other person's point of view. God would say, I did actually tell you, and I've told you that every 1,000 years for the last 6,000 years, do unto others as you would do unto yourself. This is what we call the golden rule. So as I was reading this book by Raymond Moody about this golden rule, I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, every time I say something cruel to someone, I'm saying it to myself when I pass away. Every time I look away or mean to another person, I'm actually going to experience that. That's a very powerful thought. And I think it's a wonderful discovery that Raymond Moody made in his books. By the way, his book is called Life After Life. And then he wrote a sequel to that called I think it was called More Life After Life, but he should have called it Life After Life After Life. And now there's 100 other books after them. There's so many of them. So I was thinking about this golden rule and how it comes back on us. Of course, maybe this is what the Hindu concept of karma has something to do with it. You know, what goes around comes around. But anyway, I was thinking, what if you could create a golden rule machine? In other words, it does unto you what you do unto it. What if I could make that machine? So you go up to the golden rule machine and you look at it and you punch it, and then a boxing glove comes out and punches you back immediately. Or you go to the golden rule and you spit on it and it sprays and spits on you. You go to the golden rule and you machine and you hand it a dollar bill and out sticks $10 bills. In other words, whatever you do to it, good or bad, it does right back to you. I just call that a golden rule machine. And, I mentioned this to people as a concept, and people say, well, there's no such thing as a golden rule machine. I say, oh, yes, there is. You are encountering golden rule machines every single day in your life. Every person you meet is a golden rule machine. There's just a delay between the time when it happens. And so these are fascinating concepts because we know now that we are living in a material world, but our soul is just a traveler journeying through this spiritual world, this physical world, on our way to a spiritual journey. And we have opportunities in this life to acquire spiritual qualities, and the opportunities are limitless. There's an old Sufi mystic story. I like Sufis because there's a particular Sufi poet that I like very much. But anyway, the point is that I like Sufi mysteries because they often convey truth using stories. And there's one very nice story, and it's about this man who's going to journey through the desert on a camel. He's a camel rider, and he's going to go on a very, very long journey through the desert, many, many days and weeks on the camel. He gets on the camel, and he rides, and he's riding through the desert, and suddenly his camel comes up to a riverbed that's completely dried up. It's a dried up riverbed. And as the camel cares, a voice cries out from the sky and says, "Stop, get off your camel and gather the stones in the riverbed." I think this is a bit weird, but he gets off his camel, he goes down, he gathers up a huge handful of stones, and he puts them in his saddlebag of the camel, gets back on his camel, and the voice cries out again and says, "Good, because you have obeyed, tomorrow you will be both happy and sad." And he's thinking, what do you mean how can you be both happy and sad? He couldn't understand. So he rides off into the sunset, and at sundown he sets up camp, goes to sleep. He wakes up the next morning, and he remembers the strange events of the previous day, and he goes to his saddlebag, and he reaches inside, and each of those stones had turned into precious gems. They were diamonds and rubies and emeralds. And as he looked at those gems, he was happy that he'd gathered them, but he was sad that he hadn't taken more, because the riverbed was full of stones. And perhaps this is a better concept than the binary choice of heaven and hell. Perhaps all of us will be happy for what we have been able to achieve in the path of spirituality, for what we did in this life. But we'll also be sad at the realization of the opportunities that God presented to us every single day of our lives, to be loving and to be kind and to be forgiving and to be compassionate and so on. The whole purpose of the Baha'i faith is not to get you to join so that perhaps you can contribute money or add to our numbers or serve on institutions or whatever. The whole purpose of the Baha'i faith is to help you to be a spiritual being, to be a better lover of mankind, and to work for the betterment of mankind, and to be virtuous and kind. These are the reasons why the Baha'i faith exists. Without it, it does not matter. Nobody really is going around collecting names and rolls and signatures in religion. Of course, in the past, perhaps that has degenerated in certain religions, so people just try to get followers because they want power or control. But the true purpose of the Baha'i faith is to bring the world back to spirituality. There's a pendulum that swings throughout history about every 1,000 years or so, where civilizations are often quite material and quite spiritual, and then it swings back to the spiritual again, and so on. And usually it's accompanied by the appearance of messengers of God. We believe that our goal in life is to be that force of spirituality in the world. This is the only way one can change the world. You cannot change the world, all the problems that are existing in the world today. It seems like it's getting worse by the minute, whether it be war or environmental problems or disunity or violence or whatever. These things cannot be changed except at the level of the human heart. You want to change the world, you need to change yourself. And there's a unity between the regeneration of the soul of each individual and the regeneration of the world. And this is why we believe it's so important that Baha'u'llah has come at this time to regenerate the world spiritually. So I think that's enough. Unfortunately, I can't sing for you, but you're going to, in a week or so, I'll sing you lots of songs that illustrate these points. And I think that's enough now. But if someone wants to ask any questions or make any comments, I'm quite happy to talk now.
Wonderful food for the soul. Thank you. Wonderful food. Food for thought, too. Anybody? Any comments?
Rusty has one.
I would like to ask a question.
Joyce. Welcome, Joyce.
Hi, dear. Hello, Kurt. How are you?
I'm fine.
I just heard of this tonight and enjoyed it thoroughly. But I want to know, is it going to be every week
No,
or just next week?
unfortunately, only twice a month. The first Friday of the month and the third Friday.
The first and third.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the third Friday is our musical fireside. So in a month, we'll have a musical fireside, but we could switch it around this time, and we could have Tom come back in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So, Tom, are you free by chance in 2 weeks?
The thing is, let me just see what time it is now, because I have meetings on Saturday nights. It's 3:16 p.m. Yes, I think so. I'll let you know very quickly if not. Otherwise, I'll put it in my calendar now because, yeah, it's okay. The good thing about you is that, no, the bad thing about you, you're on the West Coast, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yes. The East Coast, it would only be, it'd be early. I don't know, whatever the point
Would
is.
be earlier.
It would be earlier. That's fine.
It would give us the opportunity to invite people to come in and sit here and listen to this, and then afterward, maybe give them some apple pie and ice cream or something. However, I need to know. So if I could get you to email me, because you have my email, I know.
I have
and let me know if you're going to have when you're going to have it. It doesn't have to be the next 2 weeks or anything, but just let me know.
So in 2 weeks, in 2 weeks I'll do a musical fireside, and I'll play music at the beginning, at the end, and a few in the middle, and because it'll give me enough time to get it ready. So I think I can commit to that right now. So that
would be wonderful. Although I'm being a little presumptuous because I don't know what Jamie has lined up.
Well, whenever, then just write me.
Yeah, I'll let
Tom
you
always comes first.
I sure hope so.
It's my fault for not having the music ready today. And so
I'm sure Jamie will let Tom go in. I promise you.
We loved.
I don't know. Jamie's a pretty hard guy. You got to work. I'm kidding.
He's getting very busy. Very, very busy.
Yeah, that's good that he's busy.
Your
I have a small
beautiful
question.
speech was as beautiful as music. Thank you so much. Appreciate.
I have a small question.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Just,
Alofa.
Alofa.
Tom. Yeah. I am from Nepal. My name is Bhakta Raj Ranjit. I'm from Nepal. I have been Baha'i about 40 years. So I thought I did the teaching campaign in the Australia too with the Friends of Australia joint program, and I did a similar kind of the service in the Baha'i temple in Chicago also. I have visited, and I had a pilgrimage in the Haifa also. So now I am age of 70. So this is in the retired life. So I am writing a story and devotional songs, especially focusing to the young adults. Despite the Tom's today's talk, it is very inspiring and very interesting, and I learned a lot how to present, how to link with some